The G20 meeting did little to diffuse the global standoff over trade balances and currencies, and this morning the tensions are high in Europe, where the EU is pressuring Ireland to accept a bailout. Columbia University economist Jeffrey Sachs was at the G20 as a special advisor to the UN Secretary General. He spoke with us last week from Seoul. He's back here in New York this morning to share his thoughts. Jeff has twice been named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Jeff, I want to turn our attention to the G20 in just a second, but let's address Ireland and the EU for a moment. I have a simple question. Should Ireland take the cash?
Ireland's going to need to take some deal from Europe. It's going to have to get under some bailout umbrella. They're resisting. They're going to make it through this, I think. I think that those who say that Europe, or at least the crisis countries, are doomed to default are wrong. So I do think Ireland, Greece, and the others are going to make it through. But it's going to have to be in a package.
Now, what exactly do you believe Ireland is worried about? Why are they resisting if they're going to need to take some cash at some point, and they say they're only funded through the middle of next year? Why not now?
Well, I think everyone is trying to show their own credibility by saying we can make it on our own. This is just a panic. It's a self-feeding panic. There's a lot to that. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a framework, and the framework has to go beyond the country itself.
Jeff, what more does Europe need to do to contain the sovereign debt crisis? Because clearly it hasn't gone away.
I think they're actually working their way through. They're taking very tough measures in the deficit countries. Look at what the UK is doing. Look at Ireland's budget restriction. Look at the austerity in Greece. And this is so much tougher than anything the United States has even started to contemplate. So they're taking very, very strong measures. And my feeling is they're going to make it through and actually come out the other side.
Not just Ireland, but the whole EU.
I believe that the Eurozone will make it, and that the soft, weak countries in the Eurozone are biting the bullet right now and starting to get their fiscal house in order. So there's still a lot of skepticism. These are self-fulfilling crises to a large extent. When panic starts, it can blow things apart. As long as the European Central Bank stands behind this, and it's played a crucial role, with China also as an investor in some of these countries as they came in to buy Greek bonds. That's also one of the fundamental reasons why I think they're going to make it through.
We're back now with Jeff Sachs of Columbia University. He's an economist there and the director of its Earth Institute. Jeff, we need to turn our attention to the G20. President Obama came back more or less empty-handed. We couldn't even do a trade deal with our allies, the South Koreans. Just how weak a hand is the U.S. playing right now?
Well, the U.S. is one of the few G20 countries still in crisis, actually. Most of the G20 is having a very good year, and that, I think, is the main point. When the whole world was facing financial panic at the end of 2008, they could get together. But now most of the world actually is growing. We forget that maybe from the U.S. perspective. But from the Asian perspective, it's a boom year. From Brazil's perspective, it's a boom year. And they're annoyed, actually, at the quantitative easing. They see this as fueling more risk of bubbles. They already have enough growth. They don't want the U.S. pumping in money and they also see that the U.S. has not been able to even take a first step on the budget deficit. So yes, President Obama came with a very weak hand and left with very little.
Do people look back, though, years from now at this particular G20 and say to themselves, that was the moment when, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but America ceased to be the world's dominant economic superpower?
Everybody knows we're in a process right now where certainly the relative preeminence of the U.S. without question is declining. But the absolute state of the U.S. depends on whether we can get our act together. And so far, the answer is no. We just have political paralysis. We have extreme views on both sides. We have a massive budget deficit. We have a Fed that isn't very convincing right now. And so the world is looking on with perplexity.
Tell me this. You look at the U.S. deficit, put yourself in the position of an outsider. The Chinese, for example, you look at the deficit, you look at the debt, and the unease that it's creating, not just in China, but around the world with quantitative easing, as you just mentioned. Should this country still be rated AAA?
Well, it isn't in China right now, of course. We're starting to see our treasury bonds downgraded by Chinese rating agencies. It's pretty shocking. This is a new world that we're in right now. I've not seen such populism as we see in this country in my work abroad, where I've seen lots of crisis countries. our country is just unusually incapable of looking at the realities right now. And we have the political extremism on both sides. We do not have a serious budget plan coming from either side.
How much of that, though, can be corrected by all of this talk about closing global imbalances and fixing these currency issues? Would it make sense, as Bob Zoellick suggested last week, to go back to something like a gold standard?
Well, you know, Zoellick's little suggestion was not too well received by anybody. Everybody howled. So I put that one aside. I think this global imbalance focus of the U.S. really was a red herring in a way, and the rest of the world said, look, it's not this imbalance problem, it's your problem. Face up to your problem, start making an adjustment. All of the deficit countries have started adjustment. The United States hasn't. We are the last on the Keynesian spurt. And the rest of the world saying, start to get serious, and I think they're right.
Well, you have argued that the U.S. needs a quote-unquote austerity program, just like Greece implemented and the U.K. has since implemented. Do you see anything encouraging in the recommendations from the President's Deficit-Cutting Commission?
I think there are some ideas there. What I would really like to see from the administration is a medium-term plan, not from a commission, but from the president, because that's the unique job of the president, and I would like to see the president put forward a medium-term framework. In fact, a vision, where are we going? Not only how are we going to get the deficits down, but how is our economy going to stay preeminent in the world?
Quick question before we end up. What are the risks to the United States if we don't get that from the White House?
I think that what we're seeing is paralysis and certainly a weakening currency and a weakening economy, and we're not going to get the investment-led growth that we need unless we have confidence and a clear path ahead. Jeff,
thanks for coming to join us. Some harsh words, really, for the state of the U.S. economy, but telling us the way things are. Thank you. That's Jeffrey Sachs. He's an economist at Columbia University, directs the Earth Institute there.